Church family, hello. Let me introduce you to some of my friends who are so graciously willing to come and share on this easy topic. So, Lois, let's start with you. Give us a little snapshot, family, job, how long you've been in our church.
Wow, okay, snapshot condensed form. I'm an educator, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I have been going to this church for a long time. It's been, I guess it's been over 22 years I've been here, and I have, been a part of this church family and appreciated this church family in my own pain and suffering.
Appreciate that, Lois. And what about you, Jared? The big man?
The big man. Yeah, exactly. I was like, they're good. Hopefully they're good editing because the camera adds, and I'm hoping they can like take off about 45,000 pounds. No, I'm Jared Heidinger, and I'm also a teacher. So sorry that Lois and I are both teachers, everybody. If you like teachers, great. If you don't like teachers, you may not want to listen to us.
Too bad.
Too bad, I guess. But I've been going to E-Free for, I don't know, probably 16-ish years now. And Lo and I, we've been friends. Our families have been friends for a long time, and you know, I've appreciated this church community in different times when I've gone through some things in my life too, just like everyone has gone through different stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. So let's talk about that little elephant in the room here, brother.
Yeah, well, I think the elephant in the room, I think, is like, both of us realize that we don't have the market cornered on the answer.
Yeah, like
these things.
No answers today.
Answers.
Just we can help wrestle with this topic.
Well, it's hard.
Totally.
Like it's really, truly, it's like hard.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when we just talk, Luke, or when Lo and I, when we've talked, because I've known Lo, we've got, like, our families have gone through hardships together, not because of each other, but because these things have happened and we've been supportive of each other in our families. And so I just don't want for a second for anyone to think that I think I should be here talking about this.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's important to share what we go through so that other people can acknowledge what they go through too. But like, I mean, we teach kids and we know people that have come from way crazier and tougher things than what we may talk about. And so we don't want to pretend, hey? Like, you know?
It's always hard talking or teaching on suffering because you have no idea what people are going through.
No.
And that puts you in kind of an awkward, like, it makes me nervous.
Right.
Right?
Totally.
We don't have the corner on this. You're going to talk about too, Jared, the elephant in the room of like, we do live in privilege.
Yeah. Right, we do. Like, we live in privilege, you know, like that's like we, like we're both like middle class families. We both, our kids are healthy right now. You know, so that's, again, it's another part of like, I don't want to, how do you want to describe it? You know what I'm saying, Lo? What are we trying to say?
What are we trying to say? I think pain is pain, and like so many people have struggled through this context right now with COVID.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think grappling with this topic in different contexts, in different situations, but I would say, you know, what I learned through my own cancer journey definitely kind of prepared me for these last 6 months. And I think understanding the importance of community was something that I learned through my pain and suffering that has helped give me perspective. And I feel like I'm in a different place. It's actually been a really long time since I've talked about my cancer journey, because quite honestly, I would way rather for that to just stay in the rear view mirror and be way back there, because it's not a fun topic. And Like
Yeah,
if
that's
I,
good, Lois. This is not a fun
I would
topic.
be lying if I said,
I got to figure it out.
yeah, and guess what? I don't even want this part of my history. I never wanted it part of my story. And I think that is one commonality with pain and suffering, is that you don't want it.
Yeah.
Like that's just, to me, that's like, that levels the playing field.
Totally.
Who wants suffering? Basically nobody.
Nobody.
Yeah.
And yet it's universal. It's not if it's going to come into our lives, it's like it's when it's going to come. Like we
Yeah.
all could experience pain. Okay, so on that, let's start with you then, Lois. When was your first experience with pain?
Well, I would say probably
Like
the-
childhood kind of like pain.
Oh, anything, man. Just
Like,
when
you
was
know,
I mean,
like when you
pain
realize
is part of our reality.
when you realize
Yeah.
pain was like a thing.
Yeah, right? Like
I don't know. I just know that, like, obviously, with my cancer journey history, that would be, for me, that's a huge milestone of pain and suffering in my life. Having said that, though, like, that's not where I am right now. Like, that was 14 years ago, and so, like, for me to go back there in my mind, like, that was a
Weird.
really turbulent time, but I'm not there now, so I have a different perspective. But I'm keenly aware, and I remember what it was like,
Right.
because it was not an easy time. It was it is basically what I would call a disruption in my life, a very big disruption. My kids were 3 and 1. I was a new mom, and you know, wanting to take on the world
Right,
in every
Lois, yeah.
way. And so basically when I had that disruption of having that, like, boom, your name and cancer are in the same sentence, like 2 thumbs down, nobody wants to hear that. And that changed my life forever. So that would be my first.
yeah. Jared, you want to comment that? Or?
Yeah, like you know, like that's like I think when when you're a kid, you think everyone's pain's relative.
Yes.
And so like even like so that's the thing that we don't want to do with people that share their pain with you. You know, like you don't want to minimize what they're going through all the time, where like just because they're not going through something that you deem worthy of like being sad about, you still don't want to shut them down from expressing why they're feeling bad. But you probably ought to teach them, you know, along the way. Like if my kids are like, why do I have to do the dishes? I don't want to. That's pain. Then you're like, this is not pain. This is like, you're learning how to like be a human. Okay. That's not
that's good.
real pain. So I understand that I didn't really want to do dishes sometimes when I was a kid, but like, that's not pain. You know what I mean? Like to try and teach that kind of stuff. But the first sort of, and then going through life, you go through like when you're at different stages, it's like a relationship thing or stress from that. Or when I played basketball in university, it was like, oh, I didn't play well that game. I was like sad. Like I didn't experience a lot of real hardship.
Yeah, I was going to joke that the first experience of pain was probably in middle school when I got dumped for the first time.
Right.
And I thought everything was going well with this girl. And actually it turns out she was fancying my twin brother. So,
Right.
and the emptiness came in.
Right. But that is pain at the time.
At the time, that was big deal, man.
Well, that is pretty bad. How's
Pain
your
is
brother's
pain.
relationship with you right now?
Yeah, we
Have
reconciled.
You reconciled since? Okay, that's good. But that's the thing where that when you're young, or when you don't know anything different, depending on what it is. But we've taught kids that have been refugee kids who have gone through stuff that's like I've never gone through in my entire life.
Yeah.
And those kids are like resilient and lovely. And like you are in awe of the fact that this kid is where they're at when they just were in this horrible situation that I've never experienced. So like, but the first real pain, like the first like major change shift in my life was, when my wife passed away. So when, and that was in 2009. And my wife Krista had just given birth to my daughter Sophie, and it is kind of weird that both of us had young kids when both of these things happened at different times. But Jackson was 6 and Grace was 4, and Soph was a couple days old, and Krista had a pulmonary embolism. It was completely out of the blue. She was healthy. And it's the worst moments of my life, man. Right? It's like, you can't, like when you got cancer though, it's not real. It's like, this can't be the real thing that's happening.
Yeah.
And then it just is.
Yeah, there's like a collision in your mind where it's just, you feel like this isn't happening.
Right.
Like this is not real.
It's not real. And so then, but then that's the devastation of like loss like that, is just, it's your reality, or what you expected is no longer it's the uncertainty of now what the future is.
Yeah.
Right? It's what meaning does life hold now? Because I have a faith in God, but like, I don't know, you kind of, for me, I would read books like Mere Christianity or by C.S. Lewis, or other books that would try and remind me of why I even had a faith at all. Because I didn't lose faith, but I did question. Obviously, I questioned it, where I was like, what is the deal? Like, have I grown up? I would go into church since, I don't know, I was probably 6 or something. And you kind of grow, if you grow up, I think sometimes in a church setting, you go through and it's kind of part of your life. And then when something major happened like that, I was kind of like, okay, do I really believe what I think I believe? Or have I kind of been institutionalized through my life?
Right.
And so I had to like revisit, what is faith and is there merit to it?
Mm-hmm. And Jared Enlow, I'm going to go off that a little bit, buddy. Do you think that when you experience pain, how did it kind of push you maybe towards God, or perhaps pull you away from God? And here's what I'm thinking, Jared Enlow, that question, when did you first experience pain? Like, I think one of my earliest memories was actually a painful memory. I was probably like 5 or 6. I don't know why I remember the story, but so vividly remember the story. My grandpa was blind. I was sitting with him at a lake, and I said, man, Grandpa, you should, in my innocence, man, Grandpa, you should see how beautiful this lake is. And I remember he just turned to me and said, I just wish I could see you guys. And it just rocked me. I've just never forgotten that. This world is not the way it's supposed to be. But it's given me, I look at that and I say, I'm so grateful for my sight. I never take it for granted because my grandpa lived in the dark. But that was my first experience with pain. And I think actually, Jared, that experience eventually later in my life, probably when I was 18 years old, I remembered that, never forgot that. And that pushed me towards God, actually.
Right.
But often that's not how pain works.
No.
It can push you towards God, but sometimes it could push you away. So maybe Lower Jared, interact with that a little bit. No?
Well, I think for me, I think I was really thankful that I had a strong faith and a strong foundation in trusting God. So when I found out that I had cancer and I found out that I needed chemo and radiation and surgeries and my life was going to totally change, I was really thankful that I had faith, and I really did rely on God. Because I remember, like right before my first surgery, when they were going to take out the tumor, I'm sitting in this hospital bed waiting for my turn for surgery, and it was just one of those realizations that nobody can come with me. Like I'm heading down that hallway by myself, and who do I trust? Like, yes, you can put your faith and trust in the doctors and the surgeons to, do their job well, but at the same time, I knew that I had to put one foot in front of the other, and I needed to put my faith and trust in God, because that is and was and always will be what we can rely on. And that realization was very, very clear to me at that time.
Man, Lois, was there ever times when you felt like it pushed you away?
I won't say I felt like I pushed my faith away, or I felt like I wanted to push God away. I don't think there was ever a time when I felt like I wanted to push God away, but I definitely had questions.
Right.
I definitely had questions.
Right.
Not as much like, why is this happening? I kind of always in the back of my mind thought there's got to be some purpose to this pain. Mm-hmm. There's got to be some purpose to this story. There, even if this story doesn't have the ending that I want it to, like, there's still got to be some purpose. So I didn't exactly ask, why is this happening? I had more questions like, what's going to happen to my kids and to my husband and to my family? Because even watching them watch me was painful. Like, it's not just you get cancer or you have some other diagnosis and it's like, that's the loss. It's like, that's the first loss. Yeah. That's one of many losses. And then there's this and this and this. And it's so many things.
You can kind of control your response. You can kind of control how you want to fight it or go towards it, but you can't control the pain that other people feel around it, right?
Yeah, no, you can't. I remember, like, I tried to make a joke of it that my hair was falling out, and I'm, running my hands through my hair going, Mom, look, it's falling out. And she just cried, and I was like, I don't want to be hurting people any more than they're already hurt. I hated watching them suffer along with my suffering. I really did not.
Because how old were your kids?
Like that. They were 3 and 1.
See, so that, like me, Jared, they would be growing up and one of their first memories is Mom's.
Right.
Yeah, and I worried, like, what are they going to be like? What's going to happen to them? I'm going to break them. I'm going to wreck them. This whole cancer situation and cancer journey, like my yucky story, is going to destroy their lives. And then, fast forward 14 years, and I'm listening to my son who's thinking about what he wants to do with his future and post-secondary education, and he says something to somebody about why he wants to be a doctor, and it all comes back to that moment. Wow. I watched my mom go through cancer. I want to help people because, and you just see this compassion in other people around you. Like, I learned compassion. That was something I learned. I learned to be more compassionate, and I think that helped me and helped my family support Jared's family too when they were going through their difficult time. So, and he's had more than one thing happen. And sometimes you even feel like, why are there so many things happening? Like, there's one, but then there's all these other things. Like, right before I got diagnosed with cancer, our house flooded, my husband had meningitis, and then I had cancer, and it was like, you almost feel stupid for all these things that are happening. And then you hear people say things like, oh, like, what did your wife do that God is trying to teach her something? And I'm like,
beat it.
That's not going to help anybody right now, because nobody wants to hear that, because even though pain does chisel away at our character, I'm just not, like, I can't think like that, and I couldn't think like that, and I didn't think like that. I didn't think, why is this happening? What did I do that God is trying to teach me something? I knew that pain and suffering was a part of life, and people would say, well, don't you ask why me? Well, no, my question was, why not me? Like, why not me? Because cancer, does not have, it happens, and these different things happen randomly, or not even randomly, they happen purposefully. And I guess I asked, why not me?
Yeah.
Lot there.
Yeah, but that's kind of like that. But that's the thing where, you said God's chiseling away at your character, and if you're a piece of stone and someone's chiseling on you, like that's gonna, if rocks had feelings, like that would hurt every time someone hammered you,
Yeah.
and so, going through suffering that, I think it's very similar, like when. When Krista, and that's when that we really got to know your family a lot more, and Krista and you got closer when you did have cancer. Like that was kind of like when our families got even. We were friends before, but we got even closer during those times. And then, and you guys like took care of me, man. Like when Krista passed away, and like it was. And that's the same. It's a similar thing. It was more like you can't like so. When you're this is what I'm fumbling my words here, but like Luke, I was talking to you when we were talking about this, and I'm going, they gave you this to preach on, and it's like, like how lame is it to try and be a pastor when you're like when people are like, hey, what's Luke got to say about this? Or if you had pressure as a pastor to feel like, hey, that's what I think about. That's really sucks about like. Oops, I got this thing caught. When Christians try and have answers for everything, it's not authentic.
Right.
We don't have the answers.
Right.
Like it's just like it's not real. So like for. So when people get frustrated, like I understand their frustration, and I share the frustration of when people are like, well, if God is all knowing and all powerful, then why does he let this stuff happen?
Right, that's the question.
And that's the question. And then you're like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And I feel like that's fine. And I know that there's the Sunday school answers of like, original sin and like all things work together for good for those who love the Lord. But like when you're in a cancer ward where your like wife has just passed away and you're trying to feed your baby daughter, and I could barely almost feed Soph because it was like the hardest thing. I was like crying the whole time the first time I just fed Soph out of a bottle because she shouldn't have been being fed out of a bottle. Mm-hmm. She should have had Krista there. And it was like the worst. But it was like love at the same time. It was like all this like horrible stuff, all these feelings. And
then Jared, as we,
like,
I just couldn't imagine that brother, like that's.
Well, it's,
and then we give the pat answer.
The pat answer is
God works all things together for those who love him.
You're like, yeah, okay, like maybe someday, but like this sucks right now. Like, this is the worst.
Right.
Like just because we're Christians, like I think when I was growing up, it was kind of like, like if something hard comes, it's kind of like, God will use it for good. God will use it for good, and you're kind of like almost trained to feel guilty if you feel angry or if you feel a loss for words, or you don't feel like saying, well, I bet you God's got a plan for this. You almost learn to feel guilty about not just like jumping into the pat answer.
Right.
But like, I think it's just not true. Like, it's just not real to not have doubts or to not have these feelings of like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like Krista was involved in all kinds of stuff. She helped she taught kids, we ran basketball camps, she did all kinds of things. She was influential in lots of people's lives. Like God used her in her life. So why would you take someone who like loves you and is living for you and just like, why would you let that happen? But like but the Bible doesn't answer that.
Right.
And neither does any other faith, and neither does atheism. Like so the thing where I try and make sure I run a check and balance is like, okay, Christianity might not answer this exactly for me, but neither does anybody else. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, where does hope come from?
Yes. And see, Jared, let me because we say those pat verses, what what man intended for evil, God intended for good. I mean, we think of the cross of Christ, where it's like Jesus was wrongfully accused, suffered, crucified. That's evil, and yet God intended that for great good. And
Right.
we use that as kind of like a pat answer, but that's still true.
Right.
And this is where we just wrestle with it, because we're not.
Right.
We
it's
don't
still-
have the big picture, the 747 view, I guess.
No, like it's still true, but even Jesus was choked.
Yes.
Like Jesus was like, "Hey man, like take this
the
away
cup
from
away
me.
from me."
I'm
Yeah.
gonna have tears of blood." It says, like that's pretty rattled about your situation.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're, it's not like Jesus was like, "Well, God works together for the good of all things." Like he's like, "No, God, like I don't want to do this.
Right.
Take it away if you can." Right? And so then I feel like it's okay if Christ was rattled about it, then I can be rattled about it.
Well, I think, man, Jesus was rattled about it. He goes to the tomb of Lazarus. He knows he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead.
Right.
And he still sits there and weeps and is, as you would say,
Right,
is
which
rattled by it.
Which I don't understand.
I
Like
don't
if I knew I could if I could raise body up, then I would not be crying about. I mean, but I guess you might be crying because you're like looking at everybody else's like brokenness
Yeah.
that's around, just like we were talking about.
Well, and I think too, like I was rereading some emails that I had sent like throughout my cancer journey as I was thinking about this and remembering, how was I feeling? And in one of the emails, my husband emailed on my behalf to everybody because I had a setback and I was back in the hospital because my white count was so low they couldn't even do chemo, and that was a huge setback to me because I kept feeling like chemo is going to help, and if I miss it, I'm going to die. Like I felt very broken knowing that there was a setback. And so he wrote to everybody, and Lois says, blah, 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 I'm a basket case. And, that was all I could say. It was just
Yeah.
like, I am broken, and I don't want this to be happening. And so you kind of, with those setbacks, you kind of get that throw in the towel feeling, but I definitely know that you can experience pain and you can find some bright spots, you can
Yeah.
find some joy in it, and I think that's the part that I feel like I have hope in, is just that, yes, we can experience pain and suffering, but we can still experience joy. And I know that through that journey, and I know I do have a different perspective now because I'm, several years past that cancer journey when it was fresh and raw in my mind. But when I reread some of the things that I wrote and I remember what I was thinking about, I know there were some bright spots, and I know that
Yeah.
I learned some things about gratitude, some things about compassion, and I wonder, would I have learned that otherwise? Like I don't want cancer to be part of my story. I never wanted it to be
Right,
part of my
well,
story,
yeah.
but honestly, would I go back to the person that I was? I don't think so. Like I wouldn't have chosen cancer, but I also wouldn't want to miss out on what I've learned. I guess is where I have that sense of hope that, yeah, my character has been chiseled away, and at the same time, I'm still learning and relearning all kinds of things that I thought I already learned back then. So I don't know. It's a
Right,
journey.
but that's where I'm like, if I like, that's the thing where like I don't want to ever say though that I think that God gave Lois cancer,
Right.
and I don't want to say that I think God planned Krista to die.
Right.
I think maybe God knew, but I don't think. I don't believe that God like struck Krista down so that I could learn some lessons.
No.
Right.
Like I just don't believe that. I just don't. I think that there's sin, there's evil in the world. However, the pat answer is original sin, which is like, I don't know. That's hard to fathom. The whole just why God would even do that. I don't know why. I don't know why He did that either. Like, there's lots of questions about why God did things or chose to develop us as humans the way that it exists. But like, I wonder if that's kind of what eternity might be about, is learning all the things that we didn't understand now. And I think it'll take eternity to learn all
Right.
the nuances of what God was doing.
Well,
Because
I read and reread Job like a lot,
A lot, yeah,
because I
right.
was like, this man's life had setback after setback. And I did find hope in, and I do think that this is something that really was kind of like a clarifying moment for me. And that was at the end of Job, after all of that stuff that happened to him, at the end, he still said, okay, God, I'm sorry I doubted you. Like, I'm sorry I doubted you. And, you know, for me, that's like,
Right.
that's hope right there.
Right,
It-
and-
just that at the end of all of that, he could still say, like, I trust you, and I'm sorry I doubted you. And I had to keep reminding myself that I had to just, I could choose one thing or the other. I could kick and scream and be upset and ask why me, or I could find some purpose in that pain, and I could use my voice and my story for good. And so that's why 14 years later I can still talk about it, because I still feel like, yeah, I mean, lots of my friends are probably really tired of hearing the whole cancer journey, and I am tired of telling it, but at the same time I still think that there's purpose in that story, and it's important that I share it, because maybe it will encourage and inspire someone else, and I hope that that's true. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, like no, it's like that, right? Like, so then it's the same. It's very similar, because like when Krista passed away, she was an organ donor, and like that's the weirdest. Oh man, like you're sitting in the hospital and they just tell you that your wife has passed away, and then like very shortly after they tell you that like her brain didn't have any function, and she's on a machine, and then they're like, hey, she's an organ donor candidate. And you're just like you're absorbing the fact that you just like got dealt this like huge blow. And then now they're like, hey, do you want to give a little more?
Right.
Almost. And I knew, immediately I was like, well, Krista would for sure say, hey, like, I would love to be a part of saving somebody else if I could. Like, that was never a question about whether she wanted to be, whether she would have wanted to be an organ donor. Like, we hadn't talked about it because she was so young, but like, what I'm trying to say is it's like, there wasn't a question as to whether or not we would do that. I think that's the right thing to do. But that is part of the weirdness of this working together for good, that you don't always, that you can't see right in the darkness. But, you know, it just so happened that, like, you know, when I said, you know what, if I'm going to be asked, like, other people are going to speak, like, I heard some people speak about losing their own spouse or losing somebody else who then were organ donors. I heard from other organ donor families, and so to hear their stories, I was like, you know what, if someone wants to hear my story, then I'll always share it about organ donation. I'll always share the story, just like Lo said, you know, about her story. And then I ended up meeting, through that, I met a lady who had actually received one of Krista's corneas, and she had been blind. You know, she had this infection in her eye that ate away at her cornea, and she was in massive pain and couldn't see. And then she received Krista's cornea, and she could see. And it took years for us to kind of end up figuring out that, yes, she was the one that actually received that cornea. But like, when we figured it out, like, she actually came to my biology class last year and like spoke to my class, because that's what I teach about in Bio 30, is like the human eye, and we talk about organ donation stuff, and so she came in and talked to my class about being the organ donor, and Krista's mom got to see her daughter's, like, you know, it's just a clear front piece of the eye, but like Jana was really cool about just, she's like, hey, go ahead and look at it, you know. My kids got to see it, like, and hear the story and how thankful she was for Krista, and how she was thankful every day. She thinks about her and is thankful for it. And so there's a...
What a story, Jared.
Well, but it still sucks.
Yes, that.
So it still sucks. Like, there's still parts that hurt, right? And there's different things in my life now. Like, I met my wife, Carrie Ann, and she's amazing. And I never thought I would ever fall in love again. I didn't know how any of that was going to happen, but she's amazing. And I have a stepson who's amazing. And our family loves each other. And all of our surrounding family loves each other too. And so it's like this, now do I think God like let Krista die so I could meet Karen? Like, no.
Right.
I just, but this is God provided hope. We went through and there was hope. And now I have multiple sclerosis, right? That was just right after Carrie Ann and I got married. I started having problems with my health for whatever reason. It took a while to figure it out. Now I'm in this stupid chair. And I hate it, you know? Like, it sucks. I can't be the dad I want to be. And I'm not having a pity party here, just so everyone knows. I'm not trying to have a pity party for myself. It's just, it sucks. So then I have to be real careful, because, like, I have this chair, which can drive around, and it helps me. And like Lois said before, why not me? Right? Like, why would I assume that I'm important enough to not have any hardship in my life? And that's something that went through my mind a lot too with the Job stuff, is like, you know, Lois said Job at the end of the day was able to say, thanks, like, I love you, or like, I will serve you, Lord. But there was that part where Job was lipping off God pretty hard, and then God's like, yo, did you
who you are.
did you create did you make this? Did you make that? And Job's like, oh, you know, like, fair enough. And that's kind of what I sort of think sometimes when I start getting in a dark place or sad or like just self-pity, and I'm just like, why, God? And then he's like, hey, did you, you know, like, you might not know all the details, bro. And then I kind of have to just, like, remember that maybe I'm not as smart as I think I am. And Carrie Ann could tell you I'm not as smart as I think I am.
But I think it's okay to get pesky with God too. I feel like that's part of it too. Like,
Yes.
I feel like I got pesky with God, and that's not why I was healed.
No.
But it's just, I think it's okay to do that. I think it's
Right.
okay to knock and keep knocking, and to ask and keep asking, and to keep praying and keep hoping.
Yes.
Because honestly, that's kind of what gave me that stamina to keep on putting one foot in front of the other. It was
Right.
just, I'm going to be pesky. I'm going to keep asking. I don't know how this is going to end. I don't know how the story is going to come to completion, and I have no control over that. You know, lots of people said things like, just fight and just keep on fighting, and it's like, it's really not up to me.
Right.
But I could keep praying, and I could keep being pesky with God. And I think for me, I'm thankful that I had a faith, but I'm also thankful that I was pesky.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that constant prayer and that constant talking to God and that constant relationship with God and just conversation with God, I think was a sense of hope for me.
Yeah.
And it was also kind of my own little, my own time of solitude too, where the rest of the world was going on normally, and, you know, my friends were having more kids and I wanted to have more kids, and my friends were like taking their kids to the playground, and I was like laying in a bed, you know, just feeling gray. And run down and couldn't go anywhere and had to, do one chemo after the other, which makes you feel horrible.
Well, your immune system was shot
And
too,
my
right?
immune system was terrible. And, other people were decorating my Christmas tree and doing my Christmas shopping
Right.
and feeding my baby and, looking after my house and cleaning my house and making us meals. And I was like, I want to be doing
Right.
that. But for a time I couldn't. So, that energy was spent on a lot of prayer. And I'm actually really thankful for that. I'm thankful that that's what I did, because it gave me, it just gave me that stamina, but also at the end of the day, I feel like I was able to kind of surrender my character a little bit to God and, have that sense of hope. And I think even going through what I've gone through gives me kind of credibility in talking to some people too, right? Because I've gone through pain, so I can understand a little bit of someone else's pain. And
Right.
so that
That's a-
to me is huge.
So Paul talks, I think it's, 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about that. You go through pain for,
I don't remember, to be honest with you.
anyways, I
Yeah.
think it's in there. But I think, and Lois and Jared, and I know we got to probably wrap things up a little bit, even though
Keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Remember,
The Romans
sitcom.
8:28, the sitcom.
Sitcom,
Part
30
two,
minutes,
part
solve
two
the
coming
problems.
soon.
30 minutes, you got to solve pain and suffering.
I mean, Jared, I just like what you said going back, Romans 8:28, that God works together all things for those who love him. He is these things, we say these things. I think you got a glimpse of it, a
Yes.
glimpse with Krista, with her eyes.
Yeah.
But, and I think I love what you said, that like, some of these things we are not going to understand until eternity. We don't understand what God's going to do from beginning till end.
Right.
But you would say that bad answer though is still true, and that does give us faith when we face trial and difficulty.
Right.
Interact with that a little
No,
bit.
it does, but then sometimes then you're also like, well, what does eternity look like?
Right.
I don't know what that looks like either. So then it's like, there's, like I sometimes can question myself into a stress out. You
Into
know what
a
I mean?
tizzy.
Like we're into a tizzy,
Yeah.
where you're just kind of going, okay, like, what is heaven? It's not like the version that is on, pieces of art where there's just angels playing harps. Like, lose my mind if I was having to play a harp the rest of my life. You know what I'm saying? And in eternity, it's just like, that's not eternity. So it's hard to sometimes trust. It's hard to allow yourself to believe that all things will work together for good, that those that love the Lord, while you're in the throes of terribleness. While you're right in the middle of it, you can't see anything else. And then, so like, if someone's going through a problem, all of us go through stuff. Like people they probably turned it off by now. Okay, but like anyone who's going through hardship right now, sometimes I think we have to be honest and just be like, I don't know what the heck's going on.
Right.
And I don't know how this is going to turn out for good, and I'm choked because I don't want to be like this, And so that's the piece that I think we're allowed to do.
Totally.
And sometimes it comes back to me where I have to just go back to, okay, do I believe that there's a God? And then I start from square one, like, why are there reasons to believe that there is a God? Okay, well, there's lots of different reasons to believe that there's a God. And that's why I love Mere Christianity so much as a book. It's just like this basic sort of like, okay, you know what? You're not crazy to have faith. Like, it's not a crazy thing to have faith, even though I feel like a lot of times in the world, it's just because we don't have some answers, people make it out to be like it's crazy for you to, because we can't prove Christianity as like a concrete fact. We can't have all the answers. We don't have all the facts laid out. And that's where the idea of like, and there's different, and to be honest, there's lots of different Christians that think different things. So like if we, not having the answers is frustrating sometimes, but like it also should give us the freedom to realize that it's okay not to have all the answers and still keep searching, but not think we're crazy for having a faith.
Right.
You know?
Wrestle, doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
God's big enough for that.
right. But it's the same with like I feel like if you go through something and you're able to share it, or even I understand, like I personally understand what it's like to live in a wheelchair now, and I had never had a clue before. I've been able to like speak to different things at different spots, going, hey, is that wheelchair accessible? Oh no, it's not. Oh, okay. You know, like I can identify with. I had a kid come up to me at school the other day, and he was just like, hey, he had been taught by Carrie Ann and in middle school, and just said, hey, are you Mrs. Heidinger's husband? Because they knew that I had a wheelchair. And then he kind of shared what he was going through with his health journey. And we were able to just talk about like how these different things are kind of hard to deal with, but like how do we deal with them? How do we work? So it gives you this sort of your kindred spirit with somebody, right, Lo? Like this,
For sure.
You probably have been able to have that with,
Yep.
you know?
Yeah. No, I think it does give, like I think going through your own pain and suffering kind of gives you that sense of compassion or something else that you may not have had otherwise. And it gives you, like I've said before, it just gives you that, I guess, commonality with other people. And I think, you know, that's part of community, is sharing in one another's burdens and being able to understand one another's burdens and one another's pain. And I mean, I remember feeling very much like, you know what, I can't believe this is happening to me. I don't know why this is happening to me. But I remember when Amy was like 2, and, you know, there she was, and I was trying to console her one night in her crib, and I just like was right down by her crib, and I just was like, you know what, God, if you want it to be like this, and you want her to grow up without me and without a mom, then you figure it out. Because I am tired of trying to figure it out.
Right.
I just can't. And there's just this sense of, that's what I said. This is on you, God.
You're
like,
all
if
powerful.
this is what you've got in
The
your
feisty
plan,
part, yeah.
then here you go. Because I'm just so tired of trying to
Right.
figure it out and trying to, you know, like feel bad that it might not work out the way I want it to work
Right.
out, because there were no guarantees. And I think that's the thing about pain and suffering, but that's the thing about life. There's no guarantees. And, you know, for a long time, it looked like I had so many landmines on my life because I was the one who had cancer, and would it come back? And then, you know, shortly thereafter, Jared's wife passes away, and, you know, there we are going like that. That was unpredictable. Like, it's just a reminder of how many things in life are unpredictable, and there are no guarantees. But I really, truly believe that, you know, God will redeem all of this one day, and that
Right.
does bring me a huge sense of hope.
There's a hope.
A huge sense of hope.
Yeah.
And I hang on to that hope because I make mistakes on a daily basis. And like I've said before, so many things that I thought I learned then, I'm relearning all over again now.
Yeah.
And I just think, well, didn't I learn that from that situation? And, you know, God is still teaching me and still chiseling away a ton at my character. And there's so much that needs to be chiseled. But I do have that sense of hope that He will use pain and suffering for a purpose. He will continue to use my story for a purpose. He'll continue to use Jared's story for a purpose. And Jared has more than one story for a purpose. So it's about believing that He will redeem this and not trying to figure it all out and
Right.
trying to have an answer for pain and suffering,
Right.
but just
Formula.
knowing that it
Yeah,
does
there's
have a
not-
purpose.
right.
It does.
Right. Right. And it's like, what's so funny is like, when I'm reading my Bible, and the Old Testament is like sometimes a conundrum at the best of times in different spots where you're just like, what's happening? But one of the comedy things that Lo just said is like, she's relearning things she learned already. And I like always am going, Israelites, what's your problem, man? Like, you guys learned this 40 years ago, like, and God literally like went as a pillar in front, or like went as like a fire and cloud, and you guys still don't get it? Like, what's the problem? And then right now,
Yeah.
we're still relearning lessons that we've been taught that we just forget. And so maybe we're not so different. Like maybe we're relearning stuff. And like, to full disclosure, like, it's not like I hold on to this hope every day. Like, I just get tired some days,
Yeah,
and I'm
that's good
just
you
kind of
said that,
choked.
Jared. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's not a.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry if I'm taking too much time, but it's very important to me to like just be honest about about the fact that like it's, how do you want to say it? I don't live out what I hope I will be all the time. I'm not always the best version of the self that I think I should be. And I don't read my Bible sometimes. Lots of the times, different days. I'll look at a little verse maybe, but I always have this, and that's not great. Like, I want to be honest. Like, I don't want to be this person that comes on the church thing and is like, hey, I'm pro, I got something to share. It's more like, hey, like, it's a slog sometimes.
Yeah, it's a slog.
And
like Lois said, you never want to, when you're in it, you don't wish this upon anybody.
right.
Right? Like, you're not saying, oh, God's using this for good things right now.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't walk.
Right.
I got diagnosed with MS on my honeymoon. And
Right.
man, God's going to really use this for good. No, we're not saying
Right.
that.
Right, like we went through years of like just trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Didn't even know, and now it's this like foreboding kind of like, how long am I going to be able to, like, I can stand up right now and transfer into my bed. Like, how long is it going to be till I can't? I don't know, and that scares me, man. So I don't have, so I have fears, like.
Yeah, and I don't just worry, like, I don't worry as much about cancer anymore in my life. Like, obviously, a person who's had cancer knows that, yeah, like, once you've had cancer, for sure, it can
Right.
come back. But that's not daily in my mind every day. But I've replaced it with other fears.
Right.
And there's other things I worry about now, and that's not good either, right?
And so does
Like,
everybody. Like,
everybody does, yeah.
We've like hit all the questions in our conversation.
Have we?
Hey, Lois?
I should have
If you
put on
feel
my
like we have.
I should have put on my glasses at the
There's
start
more
so people would have been
questions.
like,
Oh, boy.
he's smart. Okay.
There's way
I don't
more.
know. I don't know.
I,
It feels like we've kind of gone around and
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
and I don't know if
we
we've.
could edit and get,
Oh, you're gonna edit.
well,
Deep chunks of editing is gonna
no,
happen
no,
here.
we're gonna,
Deep
Oh,
editing.
man.
Yeah.
no, but I was thinking too, Lois, about what you said, and you too, Jared, buddy, but like, I don't know, there is, like you said, Lois, there's something about someone who has suffered. They've been refined, they've been chiseled. Like, I would even say, like, even in looking for leaders, personally, in young adults, when we first came out here, one of our key leaders, she went through hell.
Right.
And I remember saying, you need to lead because we need your voice here, because
Yeah.
there's just something that suffering does that
Yeah.
you can't get anywhere else.
No,
in
you
a sense.
can't.
Like there is, like
No.
I think what Lois said, the purpose behind it. There's a refining. There's a purposeful. Even though we don't see it in the middle, I mean, everybody else sees.
Yeah. Well,
like,
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, no, like you've found different stuff in life that, like, or how do you describe it? It's like you don't know the good. I was saying to Luke yesterday, like you don't know what you got till it's gone, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And then, but if you're just handed everything on a silver platter all the time, you don't actually realize that you're spoiled. And so then, but I think I'm spoiled actually in most of life, really, if I think about it. If I have some perspective compared to from my life, like, I'm not food insecure, for example. I'm not, like, there's different
Yeah.
things in my life that I don't realize how lucky I am. And then when we look at the rest of the world, where some people's faith, they find that faith in God and it's their everything, because there's just like when you're walking down you're going to get surgery, that's all you've got is God
Yeah.
at that second.
Totally.
Whereas sometimes it's like we almost can pretend that we've got it. We've got this situation under control, right? But then you kind of realize, like, when you can't know how good God is if you don't know what hard times are, right?
Well, and I also think too that, that attitude of having gratitude is so crucial
Yeah.
in all of this too, right?